So just a welcome to all those who will be viewing this Mass, participating spiritually in this Mass for the first time at 5 p.m. Why am I doing this? Because I'm a glutton for punishment? No. It's actually because next week I am going to have a brother priest in the parish, as Deacon Richard will be Father Richard by this time next week, actually by this time last night. And so he'll say one Mass, and I'll say one Mass, and so why not have another Mass that is streamed? We're blessed to have this, some fellows in our parish who are wanting to stream the Mass, so we're blessed with this. So this will be every week now. And we'll also, hopefully over Advent, have more confessions available to people, so that they can access, the sacrament of penance. Eucharist is being worked out, but we want people to go to confession to receive this outpouring of grace that we all need, especially in these times when patience and discouragement, and the Lord is just saying, look, let me help you. Let me help you. And so we'll be, in the confessional more often during the season of Advent. So once in a while I say this now that I've got, Deacon Richard's never heard me say this, but the liturgical reason why there's no Gloria during Lent, so that I can preach longer. See, he laughs because it's not going to prevent me from preaching shorter or longer. But, and if you believe that, I have an igloo to sell in Eskimo. So anyways, our concept of what we refer to the spiritual life is all too often communicated, at least in spiritual literature, as a kind of mountain we have to climb. Like, I know most people perhaps viewing this will not be familiar with a man named Thomas Merton, but he wrote a very famous book called The Seven-Story Mountain. It's a very, very good book on the spiritual life. And there's nothing wrong with this, but it's just there's something that can be really daunting to people. And if we sort of it gives way to this idea that we have to somehow, climb this mountain. I just can't do that. God is way up there and he's waiting for me to get to him. Again, it's not wrong, but for many people, it's just not the image. And it's not a put down of Thomas Merton or anybody who's written a book like that with using that metaphor or that image, but it's actually not the biblical image of our spiritual life. The biblical image uses the primacy of grace. That's the biblical image, the primacy of grace. Namely, that it's God who takes the first initiative. God always takes the first initiative. And if you think about it, from Genesis to Revelation, it's always God who's taken the initiative. So it's deeply biblical from the first to the beginning to the end. God creates Adam and Eve. God is the one who goes after them when they sin. They don't go after God. They don't run back to him. God goes after them. And all through the Old Testament, it's God who's coming to his people, God speaking to them through the prophets. And then what we're preparing for, the celebration of Christ's birth, it's not we going to God, it's God coming to us. God is coming to us in the person of Jesus Christ. And this is something throughout our entire life we have to somehow get into our head, get into our DNA, our spiritual DNA. It's not about me going to God. It's about me doing something, doing what I can do, my part, to allow God to come to me. That's the primacy of grace. That's what is meant by the primacy of grace. This is so important. In a way, it takes off of us what's wrong, but it also is like this load that we have, that somehow I have to do something to make myself worthy of God. It's not possible. And in fact, if I am up to my eyeballs in mortal sin, it's not that God is not going to want to come to me. So it's not that God doesn't like what I've done. He hates sin, but he doesn't hate me. God can never hate me. So he still wants to come to me. So it's on the one hand, it's a wrong idea, but it also takes a tremendous load off of us that I don't have to climb some mountain. I don't have to go to God. God, I have to, if anything, I have to do something. I have to do my part is to allow God to come to me. That's what's really important. Listen to how Isaiah the prophet speaks to the people. It's actually the Lord speaking to his people through Isaiah, but he's still speaking to you and me directly. When we read these words, God is speaking to B.J. Hamilton, to Mark, and to Deacon Richard, and so on. In the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be lifted up, and every mountain and hill made low. So this is obviously the language of metaphor. But the people kind of understood this, what it really was driving at. It's not about highways per se, although apparently between Babylon and Jerusalem, it's not an easy walk. There are valleys and there are hills. So you have to kind of, work your way through the terrain. So even physically speaking, the people were getting this idea. But it's spiritually, the prophets would unpack this for the people and drill down on it. Like, we have to clear the ground. We have so many things that are in our life that need to be cleared away. And we can do that. We make decisions to do that. We have to be intentional to do that so that God may come to us. But the beautiful thing is that even in the process of doing this, God is already helping us so that he can come to us. So in other words, God is backing up my decision, my resolve. He's not making me do anything. But if I make a decision, God helps me to follow through on the decision so that he can come to me in a fuller way. Isn't that beautiful? It's beautiful. He wants me to win. God wants everybody to win. He wants the absolute, total, 100% best for us. So he's even helping us prepare the way. But we have to be intentional. We must make the decision. We will not be forced. And even if the devil tempts us, there's a line beyond which the devil cannot go. He can never make us do anything. We must be convinced of this. Even though I know we got weaknesses and sometimes we'll still fail. All right, we have to deal with that. So this is really important for us to kind of reflect on and let it get down into our spiritual bones, our spiritual DNA. This image that God presents to us on the second Sunday of Advent, we're now stuck in the thick of Advent, and those messages I spoke about last Sunday are perhaps turning up their volume. Fear all things COVID. We're all waiting as, business people and church people alike, because we're all citizens of the province, is what will happen, on Monday, the 7th. Will it be rolled over? Will it not be rolled over? And so on. But there's all sorts of other things as well that people are just struggling with. Buy more than you need or want because it makes you feel good, or perhaps you feel it gives you that little boost, of mental energy and, for a little while anyways. And then watch. That's the one we want to allow to get through. Watch and prepare for the coming one. It's interesting that both Isaiah and John the Baptist never talked about the Messiah per se. They talked about the coming one. So they knew that the scriptures God was telling his people that he was going to come to them. They didn't understand fully how he was going to do this, but they expected God to come to them, and boy, did God ever deliver. So think of God not as someone on the top of a mountain or someone that we have to climb up to in order to get to, but rather think of God as a kind of helicopter. It may seem like a silly image, silly metaphor, but like God is a helicopter who wants to land in your area, meaning in your heart, in your life. He wants to rescue you. He wants to rescue you from the enemy, and he is unable to land because there's so much debris in the landing that it's not possible. And that's kind of what the prophets are getting at. It's even what John the Baptist is repeating, like, prepare the way of the Lord so he can land in your life, so he can come to you and rescue you. He wants to be your savior. Save you, that's a whole nother, save you from what? I'm not going to get off on that, but we understand that. He wants to come to us. You and I need to clear the landing area, make it a place where it can land, where the helicopter can land, a place where God can land and do what he wants to do and do what he does really well, and that is come to us and rescue us. The work that the readings remind us of that we need to do during the season of Lent come through clear in the prophet Isaiah and John the Baptist. Make straight the way of the Lord, which is the Bible's way of telling us that we need to get rid of the obstacles preventing God from being with us. This is where what we call detachment comes in. It's where we call detachment comes into play. This word is not understood by many, and perhaps it turns some people off, or it sort of brings up, resistance or maybe even fear. I don't know what I can give up. I'm not strong enough. And perhaps if we spend a little time thinking about it in the presence of Jesus, some of our fear will go away. The first thing to be said is that we do not initiate the fact that it's God who initiates this. And even asking God to help us, he'll help us initiate the process. Many times we think we have to do it on our own, and that's probably why we continue to fail. And we can't do anything to please God per se. God helps us to please him. So it can be a real game changer for people once they allow this truth to really get down into their spiritual marrow, their bones, their DNA. We have to do our part, but the real fruitfulness of this is done by the Lord himself. The second thing we need to focus on is, what does it mean clearing the land? So that the helicopter, God, can land and rescue us. This is where it might get a little scary for some of us, but if you just persevere a little, you realize how freeing it really is. And this is really what Advent helps us to do as we prepare and approach. The Lord is coming to us again. The Lord is coming to us. St. Teresa of Avila gives some very wise advice about clearing the land. I'll focus on one of her pieces of advice. Again, it may sound a little scary at first for some people, but I'm going to just briefly unpack some of this. She says, we need to have detachment from all that the self holds worthwhile. I say, it may be scary, it may sound scary. Because unless we are willing to do this, our lives are going to be ruled by fear. There's that fear again, that message of fear. And fear, she says, this is the wisdom of the saints, fear is the chief activator of our faults. St. Paul would devote a fair bit of his writing on this, how the evil one uses fear to bind us, to keep us from opening, to prepare the way of the Lord. You can't do it, he says to us. He whispers in our ear, don't be an idiot. The other way is easier. And the voices go on and on. The temptations, the lies continue. So what are examples of this? Well, there are many, but just, to highlight a few. What are ways that we can clear the ground so that God can land and come to us? Being liked too much. It leads a lot of people astray. We call this just the sin of human respect. There's nothing wrong with being liked per se. Everybody wants to be liked. It's being too much, liked too much, so that, we're led around like a leash, like a dog on a leash by people's affirmation and so on. It's being in charge, always wanting to be in charge, never being able to delegate. And so nobody has any breathing room, no creativity. You got to be in charge of every minute detail, which is a good way to go mad. And many people scatter because they don't know that eventually they feel suffocated. Being praised all the time. And people usually know that we're vain, that we want to be praised, and this can be used against us very easily. Liking food or our own opinion too much. There's lots of examples of this. Think of how these things can clutter our heart, enslave us, keep us down and choke off freedom. Binging on Netflix or whatever. Could be on Amazon Prime, whatever it is, on YouTube videos for hours and hours on end. It can happen so easily. But then, all the other stuff comes, and almost everybody knows deep down, I don't want to be doing this. So think of how these things, as I said, can clutter your heart and choke off freedom. If we are really willing to think about it, and this is where we can examine our conscience so we can really see what needs to be cleared away for the great landing of God, we will see how they prevent God's grace from rushing into our lives and giving us the freedom that only God can give us and wants to give us. The wise St. Teresa was not about getting rid of things or people or distancing ourselves from them, but rather of allowing the primacy of God's grace to be present in our life. This is the only way that Advent is going to be spiritually fruitful, a spiritually fruitful time for us. And here's the thing. The message that I spoke about last week, fear and buy, and then there's watch. If we clear the ground, even if we make the attempt, if we are intentional about clearing the ground and taking some steps to ensure that God is able to help us prepare his own way, then fear goes away or is reduced and buying is put in check. Doesn't mean we don't buy anything, but we buy for the people we love and we buy within accord of our bank account, let's say. Because the primacy of grace, we're thinking about God. We have more peace in our lives and a readiness for God. End result, we're more human and we're happy. We've got to give God a chance. We want to make time for Mass, for example, these days, in real time when it is streamed, for confession when we can go, or private prayer. We are looking for ways to help and assist others and being intentional about it, like the Doors Open or Covenant House here in Vancouver, if you're listening from Vancouver. Advent is a time to prepare the way of the Lord, but don't think you have to do it yourself. Ask God to help you prepare his own way, and he will do it. This is what he wants to do. He wants to do it so much, but we have got to ask him. So just ask him. Let us see where we can clear out the landing area of our hearts. Even if you do it in baby steps, take baby steps. There's nothing shameful about taking baby steps, because a baby step is better than a no step, or a baby step is better than a step backwards. A baby step is a good step. It's a step forward, so that God can land and you just see how much happier you will be.